Our objective this lecture is to understand and look into a 2D Cartesian coordinate system. We're going to find out how to draft in 2D in model space in AutoCAD LT 2017. But first, let's start out by asking ourselves an easy question. Where did Cartesian come from? Well, let's go to the internet and we're going to look at a gentleman by the name of René Descartes. He was looking at a fly flying over his bed in the 1600s, and he came up with an idea to define a point in 3D space through an X, a Y, and a Z coordinate fashion. Of course, when you write something in a scientific paper back in the 1600s, you do it in Latin, and Descartes became Cartesian. That's how it evolved into that. So we call it the Cartesian coordinate system. In 2D space, using the Cartesian coordinate system, we start at a point of origin called 0, 0. And what we do is we go over in the X and up in the Y. And that's going to give us a point. So if I zoom in by rolling the wheel on my mouse and I just pick a point, it tells me I went over in the X 132 feet, 0 inches. And then I came up in the Y 79 feet. And that's the 2D point being defined in a positive X and a positive Y. So if I pan over and I look at the other 4 directions you could go from the point of origin, 0, 0, the center of the universe, if you will, then you're going to be seeing a minus X and a minus Y if I go down to this quadrant, or up over in this quadrant if I ID a point, any old point. It'll tell me I went in the X in a minus fashion, but up in the Y in a positive fashion. You'll notice the Z is always laying flat because we're in 2-dimensional space. So let's look at this again. Point of origin, we came over in the X and up in the Y. If a 24 by 36 inch piece of paper, which is what most architects, engineers, surveyors, interior designers use in their offices, and we have a 36 inch long piece of paper in model space, and it's a 1/4 inch drawing, then you'll go 4 times 36, which is 144 feet. So if I ID in the positive X and positive Y, that upper corner, you'll see it says 144 feet, and then up in the Y, 96 feet. And the 0 again is flat. It's 0 because we're doing 2-dimensional drafting. Now if we come over and click on the drawing I made for 3D, you'll notice now at the point of origin, we've got a 0, 0, X, Y, and Z. This is going to tell us where we are in 3D Cartesian coordinate space. So if I ID, press ID for the command, and I come over here to the top of that quadrant, and I come over in the X, up in the Y, and then up in the air, now we've got 50 feet up in the air of the Z. Conversely, if I come over to the minus side of things, and I come over and then down 50 feet, and I ID it, now I'm at the other extreme, and you'll notice in my defined space in 3D, I've come over 144 feet, and then down in the Y, minus Y, and then minus Z. So that point is going to be negative for all 3 values in the 3D coordinate system. So imagine this being a football field, a soccer field, lacrosse field, and you've got the goalpost or the goal, and it's sticking up in the air. How would you define that? Well, let's look at another drawing I have, and that is over in a 3D space. And you'll notice that we've got goalposts and little pylons. So if I come over and I grab right in the middle of that goalpost, right in the center of it, it's going to tell me that I am up in the air 30 feet in the Z, because we are going to end up having the distance from the corner where you begin coming down in the X over here, and then up in the Y, and then the Z will be how high up the goalpost is. So if I'm in the Goodyear blimp and I'm looking straight down on that goalpost in the football game, then you would only see a dot. So let's go up to our pull down to view, and we're going to go to our name views, and I'm going to tell this pre-made, of course, that I want to set current my 2D view. We're now looking at that football field, and I'm saying just a dot. And the reason for that is I'm looking at a 3-dimensional object in 2D. This course will be teaching us how to do 2-dimensional drafting in AutoCAD. Now this line you saw was laying flat on the field. If I ID the end of the line and I just want to see where that line ended, again, the z is 0. It's telling me the x is positive and the y is positive because we came over from our point of origin, the x and the y. So this will give us a good grasp of what 2D dimensional space is. We're always going to be in the Goodyear blimp looking straight down on whatever we're drafting in 2D. In the next lecture, we're going to talk about how we enter coordinate space and draw lines, absolute coordinates and relative coordinates. But right now, I want you to understand two-dimensional space versus three-dimensional space and how you go to the view command and how you can go and move around. So let's say we want to go and look in 3D space, rotating around. This command lets you rotate around, viewpoint. You can see the X, Y, and Z being represented by those three sticks, if you will, that rotate. If I'm straight down looking from the Goodyear blimp, I would see just the X and the Y. If I'm standing on the ground looking like the coach would out on the football field, I would see the goalpost sticking up. This outside ring is if I'm underground. So if I'm over here, you'll see that I'm looking just about like we were sitting up in the stands, and you can see the X, Y, and Z. So this is what we want to understand. We can look in 3D in LT, AutoCAD, but we draft in 2D 90% of the time because you're really only going to have a portion of the commands you need to do 3D work. So that's the objective of our lesson today.